The meeting is also being live streamed on Access Health CT website. It's a request from some of our constituents, and I think it's a transparent way that we're continuing to showcase all the stuff that we're doing here in Access Health and build trust and engagement with our stakeholder partners. So with that, I will welcome everyone and request that we take an attendance to just confirm again that we do have quorum. And I will note we are going to have a couple roll call votes today on the agenda. And I'd ask that when people speak at the moment they speak, if they could identify themselves, it helps for following the conversation and for note-taking purposes. So with that, Marcin, if you'll take attendance for today's meeting.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Claudio Gualtieri, Chair.
Here.
Matthew Brackman.
Here.
Thank you. Thomas McNeil.
Here.
Chantel Vars, Deputy Commissioner from DSS.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Manisha Tutani from DPH.
Here.
Thank you. We have full attendance, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Thank you. This is Claudio again, and now I will turn it to James Michel for purposes of a new introduction to the team and then asking the rest of the Access Health team to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to introduce Holly Zwick. She's our new Director of Finance. Holly started with us close to about 3 weeks ago. And she's a great addition to the team. She brings a lot of experience in this space, especially in the quasi-public space and specifically in the finance area. So I want to introduce Holly Zwick to the committee. Holly, welcome to the team. Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over. And so let's move on. Holly, you want to introduce yourself very quickly, then we'll go around the rest of the team to introduce themselves. Holly, you're on mute, Holly.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Holly Zwick, Director of Finance, Access Health CT, and thank you so much for the warm welcome.
Excellent. Thank you, Holly. Welcome aboard. I'm sure we're going to be able to tap into your expertise both in this committee and in the audit committee. And I think you'll find the board to be a really robust and energetic group. We tend to have strong opinions and will advise accordingly. So it's a good culture all around, and we're happy to have you on the team. With that, I'll ask. Great. With that, I'll ask if the rest of the Access Health staff members in attendance today will briefly introduce themselves.
I guess I'll go next. Susan Rich-By, Director of Legal and Governmental Affairs.
Good morning,
Chapman.
everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Chapman. Okay.
Good morning. This is Glenn Jurgen, Director of Human Resources, Access Health Connecticut.
Anne-Marie Chapman, Controller, Access Health CT.
Janelle Maloney, Director of Information Technology.
Sinisha Tsurunkovich, Head of Financial Planning and Analysis at Access Health CT. Morning.
All right, this is Claudio again. That brings us to the next topic of the agenda, which is public comment. I was informed we received no public comment, written comment in advance of today's meeting. I will pause to see if there's anyone currently on who wishes to be recognized from the public. And once Marcin can confirm whether or not there is any additional public comment, we can move to the next item.
There is no additional public comment, Mr. Chair.
Right, thank you. Next item of business is review and approval of our meeting minutes. The meeting minutes were sent out in our package for today's meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes? It was for the June 25th, I should be clear. So it's a request.
June 5th.
June 5th.
Okay, Mr. McNeil.
Mr. McNeil has made a motion to approve the special meeting minutes for June 15th, 2023. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Giuttani, thank you for the second. Any discussion, requests for additions or edits to the meeting minutes? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote on approval of the meeting minutes.
Claudio Gualtieri.
Yes.
Matthew Brackman.
Abstain. Thomas
McNeil.
Yes.
Chantel Vars,
Yes.
and Manisha Jutani.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, this is Claudio again, and our next agenda item today, I'll turn it over to Sanisha to talk about the FY23 year-end budget report. Sanisha, if you could take it away.
Thank you, Claudio. Mr. Chair, Sinisha Crnkovic, Head of Financial Planning and Analysis at Access Health CT. So today we'll be presenting the fiscal year 2023 budget report, as well as the fiscal year 2024 Q1 budget. And I'll start off with the fiscal year 2023 budget versus actual. So we can go to the next slide, please. Next slide. So in fiscal year 2023, we were under budget by 894,000 roughly. And I will provide a little bit more detail on this on the next slide. On the revenue side, we received additional grants, as well as the interest rate held steady over the last fiscal year. So we were over budget on that as well, which is great. On the expenses side, we had some, we were under budget. We had some vacancy savings. In addition to that, on the contractual was under budget because the continuing pandemic measures in the last fiscal year. And as well as continued process improvements. There were some savings with the remote work, as well as timing of the insurance renewals. We did do some additional IT work, including installation of the government's risk and compliance system. Are there any questions here, or we can go to the next slide? There's one more, I think, on this topic.
It looks like there are no questions. Thank you, Sanisha.
And I just wanted to, so this slide here represents projects that were started in fiscal year 23 and are continuing into 2024. So they were committed and started, and these projects are all expected to be completed on budget and on time by the end of this current fiscal year.
The only comment out is that these are all IT related projects. And you see the Make It Unwind. If you remember last year, the board authorized us to spend the $2.7 million for marketing and outreach purposes for the Make It Unwind. So that's ongoing. And but the bulk of the work is all IT related projects, and in many respects required mandatory adjustments that we have to make to our system to meet IRS and CMS requirements.
Thank you, James.
James, and this is Claudia, just for purposes of awareness for the rest of the committee, I know we had a quick sidebar about this morning, but closely related to the Medicaid unwind, we're seeing some continued growth in the covered Connecticut market. I think you reported the good news. We're over 20,000+ now enrolled, and the system changes, which Access Health, in conjunction with the board, works so closely on to try to make it easier and very intuitive for people to understand the covered Connecticut option on the exchange, are starting to go into effect. So we'll see that impact on the next set of reports from the enrollment numbers.
Absolutely. Right now we are 21,500 plus in the Covered Connecticut program. We anticipate that's going to continue to grow, especially that now that we automated the process and we're in the middle of open enrollment. So as Connecticut residents come in to renew their 2024 plans, if they qualify for Medicaid for Covered Connecticut, they will be automatically enrolled. So it makes it a lot easier. So we expect that number to grow during the 2024 open enrollment. So again, we'll keep the board abreast of the progress that we're making in that space. But we are very pleased to cross that 20,000 threshold and marching towards 30,000 plus.
That's great. Thank you, Commissioner Jutani.
Thank you, Claudio. So just a question about the 1.4 remaining in the Medicaid unwind. Is that primarily to be used for the outreach efforts and communications? Is that what I understood from what you said?
Yes, this is all for marketing and in-person outreach.
And in-person outreach. Okay. And so do we anticipate that this is on course to be able to continue to engage people in terms of those funds?
Yes. And right now, we had other funds committed for open enrollment.
Okay.
So we're expending those money now. But once open enrollment is over in January 15th, then we'll resume spending money exclusively for Medicaid Unwind through, I believe, April or May.
Okay, thank you.
Matt Brockman, question?
Yeah, can you clarify on the budgeting side of this? So are these are we keeping the 5.7 in the FY23 budget, or are you suggesting that we're moving these costs from 23? I guess assuming a certain savings, then booking new costs in 24 budget.
No, we're not moving from 23 to 24, and they are committed and incumbent against the 23 budget.
Okay,
so
these are all. This is all booked in the slide above on page 8.
Correct.
Okay.
But obviously, we haven't spent the money yet. We haven't cut checks yet. But we're committed. Right. So.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcin. Marcin, okay, thank you. So we have always provided the Finance Committee and the board information on the balance of the exchange reserve funds, where they're invested, and the interest we earn through those accounts. Our exchanges investment policy, which was adopted back in 2012, provides that the exchange would make an annual report and annual and semi-annual reports actually to the board on its investments. So in compliance with that requirement, we have created a new investment report that will be presenting the first annual investment report here today to you guys for the fiscal years 22 and 23. So the objective of our exchanges reserves, if you will, is to maximize the rate of return while also preserving the principal. But this all has to be liquid. So therefore, we have been investing our reserves, our exchange funds into the STIF accounts, which is a short-term investment fund managed by the State Treasurer's Office. And as you might be aware, the STIF is used throughout the state. Can be used. Other agencies use it, and it's a very safe investment vehicle. If you can move to the next slide, please. Like I mentioned earlier, the STIF reserve funds are invested in STIF, and here on the left side of this slide, you'll see the what we have earned in the last 2 fiscal years. Obviously, last year being much stronger with interest rate being higher. In addition to that, our employees we contribute to a 401A account for our employees' retirement, and those contributions are provided through a company called Mission Square, which was recently rebranded. And the Mission Square was started by a company called International City and County Management Association back in 1972 to serve the needs of the public sector employees. The Mission Square has over $70 billion in assets under management, and it's provides retirement plans and related services to more than 1 million public sector participant accounts. And both these So we have attached reports for both Mission Square as well as for the STIF account for the last 2 fiscal years.
Very quickly, Mr. Chairman, just our employees, we're not state employees, so we do not participate in the state pension plan. Right? Although we do participate in the state 457 plan, where employees could put money in there, but we also provide them a defined contribution plan, the 401A, and we do have a match of up to 5%, dollar for dollar match up to 5%, and that's what we are referring to here.
Thank you, James, for that context. That looks really good. Any questions on this slide from committee members? All right. Thank you. This is Claudio again. The next agenda item, we're going to be also turning to Sinisha to talk to us about FY24 Q1 budget report. This will require a vote of the committee once complete. So I'll turn it to Sinisha to walk us through.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In fiscal year 2024, we continue focusing on our 3 strategic initiatives: IT investments, cybersecurity, and health disparities. And if you please go to the next slide. First, I'll be presenting you the first quarter budget versus actuals. So these are actuals through the first 3 months of the fiscal year through September. Through September, we are $674,000 under budget. And this is mainly due to timing. And now on the next slide, you'll see a little bit more detail on that.
Sinisha, I think we over budget, right? Not under.
Oh,
budget.
sorry. Yes,
Okay.
yes, over budget. I wish. Yes, we are over budget, and this is again mainly due to timing of projects and expenses. Sometimes some of our projects, in this case, we're able to launch some projects a little bit earlier, which brought us a little bit ahead of our expenses. But by the end of the fiscal year, Marcin, if you can turn to the next slide. By the end of the fiscal year, we don't expect and we will not exceed our budget. This is just a view through the first 3 months. Next slide, please. For the full year budget for the fiscal year 2024, we are not projecting any changes at this time. The budget will remain the same. And if you go to the next slide, this is just a little bit more detail on that. You'll see there are no changes at this time that we're asking the committee to approve for the full year budget for fiscal year 24. As you know, it's a little bit early in the fiscal year. If there are any changes, we will come back to this committee for your approval. Next slide, please. This represents the fiscal year 24 full year budget, Access Health with DSS shared cost. Just like in the previous slide, at this time, we don't anticipate any changes. All right, thank you, Marcin. So on fiscal year 2024, we are projecting our reserve fund balance to be at $18.5 million. And that translates into 6.6 months of operating reserves. So that means if we stopped receiving any revenue, we could keep operating for close to 7 months without funding. Go to the next slide. I'm not sure if we're taking a vote now. Yes.
Great. Thank you, Sinisha. Any questions on the presentation as presented for our FY 2024 Q1 budget report? Seeing none, I think then I would entertain a motion at this point to approve the FY 2024 Q1 budget report as presented by the exchange staff. Do I have such motion?
So moved, Matthew.
Thank you.
Seconded, Tom McNeil.
Motion is moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, we can proceed to a vote.
Claudio Gualtieri,
Yes?
Matthew Brackman,
Yes.
Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Chantel Vars,
Yes.
and Manisha Tutani.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, Claudio, again, we're entering the last bits of our agenda, and we did want to talk about the reserve policy. This has been a topic that the board has engaged on and wanted some sense of what is the policy and rationale for setting a specific reserve number, and how do we justify that and benchmark compared to other nonprofits and exchanges. So I know Access Health has done some initial work on this, and I think this is meant to be a little bit more of a deep dive for our committee to engage and have questions and back and forth on. So with that, I'll turn again to Sinisha for an overview of the fund reserve policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So over the last few months, we've been working on drafting a reserve fund policy. With that, we have done research to look at where other organizations that we might be closely related to stand with reserve on their reserve funding. So first of all, we did research on the other state-based exchanges. And this chart below here presents other state-based exchanges that we have reviewed, where their reserve amounts stand at. And one of the couple of the things I wanted to mention is that some of the other state-based exchanges are get some of their funding, or they might be get some of this funding from states. So examples. Sometimes a exchange might be in buildings that are owned by the state, or they might, because of that, they might not have to also need insurance. So some of those fundings being built in, so because of that, they might not even have a reserve policy or reserve funding set. The next slide, we also did research on
Marcin, this is Claudio. If I could just go back to that slide, I just want to be clear. So when we're putting non-applicable, is that because there is no reserve policy or no reserve established in any of those state exchanges, and the reasoning being that in those cases they are apparatus of the state and have building covered by the state government? Or what does the NA mean, just for clarity on this one?
The NA just means that they don't have a policy, reserve policy or reserve funds. Now, what on the other part, there's a mix, so it's hard to.
So Claudio, to your point, Claudio, many of these the other states, they are part of a state agency, like equivalent to DSS. Sometimes when the exchange was created, they were attached to either DSS type of organization or the insurance department, like in New York State. Under the New York State Exchange is part of the insurance department, or part of the banking department. So they're an extension of a state agency, and so most of the expenses are absorbed by a state agency, and so therefore there's no need to have any type of reserve because they are supported by tax dollars. And I don't know, like in Maryland, although they're part of the state agency, but they still raise funds through an assessment. But however, there's still no reserve requirement because they're part of a state agency. Virtually all of them are in that space. Rhode Island also is part of, I believe they are part of the insurance department in Rhode Island. They're an extension of the insurance department in Rhode Island. Washington State also is part of a state agency. But in Connecticut, California, Colorado, and DC, there are standalone organizations that like Access Health. That is why they have reserves within their financial statements, but the others they don't have a reserves because they're part of a state agency. So therefore, most of the expenses are absorbed by the state government, as opposed to us being completely funded by our own resources.
That's really helpful. Thanks. Claudio, again, just one quick follow-up then. So is it my understanding that the Idaho, Maryland, Massachusetts, those ones that are listed here as not having an applicable reserve, that the operational support comes from a general fund appropriation or an appropriation through an insurance assessment by those state entities? Or are they still obligated to sort of balance their books and raise revenue through an assessment that's separate from the state budgeting process?
A combination of both.
Okay.
Combination of both in most cases. They're doing both. There may be a small assessment, but a good chunk of their operational expenditures are supported by state agencies because they don't pay rent, they don't have to have insurance. Their technology systems are all supported by the state because they're part of the state system. However, marketing and outreach, those type of non-state expenditures may be supported by an assessment. Which incidentally, those who do have an assessment, they're still much higher than Access Health, even though we are supported exclusively by assessment. Their assessment typically is a lot higher than ours.
Okay, helpful. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So we also have looked at the other Connecticut quasi-public agencies, and only one of them had an unrestricted reserves. When I say unrestricted, some of the other state agency quasis had reserve that are restricted to specific operating items. For example, the lottery has to have a reserve to pay for the payout for the winnings, which is really part of their major operations. Next slide, please.
Before you go, any questions at all about that? We want to make sure there's some clarity there with the difference between reserve and restricted and unrestricted, as initially indicated. They all have reserves. Most of them have reserves, but the reserves are for a specific purpose, where they can't spend it on anything other than what's designated for that for specific amounts within their bottom line.
And we only do the unrestricted reserve, right?
Well, we have both in ours. Like this earlier, Matt, we talked about the carry forward projects.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that's buried into the reserve until we actually spend it. So that's why we have 8.4 down to 6.6, because about a good chunk of that money is restricted for the commitments that we have in the prior year. But other than that, we are relying exclusively on our unrestricted reserves, which at this point represents 6.6 months of operations. But we do want to give the full picture to the board. That's why we have the entire amount minus the restricted part.
Great, thank you. Claudio here, recognizing Commissioner Giuttani for a question.
Thank you, Claudio. Yes, thank you for going back to this slide. Can I just confirm what you just said, James, that you do have an unrestricted reserve? Is that correct, of the over 6 million?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
No. Over 6 months right now it's about $18 million of unrestricted reserves.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
At the end of the current fiscal year. I mean,
okay,
at the end of the last fiscal year.
At the end of the last fiscal year. So in addition to the list here, Access Health is also on this list of quasi-public agencies that have an unrestricted reserve, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there also a restricted reserve or only an unrestricted reserve? Okay.
We have a total reserve and of about $24 million, $23 million,
Okay.
Tanisha. All right,
Yeah.
and part of that is restricted for expenditures that we've committed to.
Okay.
And the balance is about $18 million, which represents about more than 6 months of operating expenditures.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
And then just to this, Claudio, again, because I think both Matt and Commissioner Giuliani have hit on this, and I want to sort of tie it together. We operate with an unrestricted reserve until we earmark it. And when we earmark it for a specific purpose, like we have all those carry forward projects, but by and large, it comes in and we build it up as unrestricted. It's not like it's always dedicated to labor expenses or a particular item before it gets deposited. Is that right?
Correct. As
Okay.
a matter of fact, the reserve grows over years by having excess revenues or unspent expenditures that were authorized by the board. So if we have anything left over at the end of the fiscal year, it rolls into reserves, and it's unrestricted reserves, and that's how it's built over the years since I've been with the organization.
Yeah. Sounds good. So as I think of it, as we mostly operate with an unrestricted reserve, and there is a small subset that is committed of that reserve for specific projects that the board has voted on. Thank you, James, for clarifying.
We also have looked at Connecticut not-for-profits that are in similar size as Access Health is. And this chart here will show you none of the nonprofits research had a significant amount of unrestricted reserve. So we are proposing a reserve fund policy to formalize, what the target amount should be, and also determine, this policy determines the intended use of those reserves. As you'll see in this chart below here, this is a little bit of a history of where our reserves were over the last 7 years. At the highest level at about 8.7 months in 2016, and then has been slowly dropping over the years. Next slide, please. And we have attached a draft reserve policy to this presentation, but just to summarize it real quick. These are funds that are designated by the action of the exchanges board. We have in the policy, we are proposing a 9 to 12 months of operating funding, so 9 to 12 months of reserve, which is between $25 and $33.6 million. James mentioned earlier, we fund our reserves using usually unspent budget or additional revenue that was over the budget. These reserves can be used for an anticipated loss of funding, for one-time projects, just like we did in the past year, where we funded some of the Medicaid unwind marketing and outreach efforts, or sudden increases in expenses, as an example. And usually when we ask to spend those reserves, we go to the board and get the approval, so there would be no change to that. I believe this might be the last slide of this presentation.
Mr. Chairman, very quickly, some context around the 9 to 12 month threshold. We operate in a very volatile environment where IRS, CMS could change policies, particularly in the IT security space, and so that requires a lot of expenditures, and sometimes they give you a deadline that's almost impossible to meet. So we have to move very quickly because of the unknown nature of those policies, in the ever-changing world of the IT space. We think this is a responsible approach, so that gives us the flexibility to change, to make adjustments as needed with the board's approval. So we think 9 months is reasonable, but no higher than 12 months.
Matt, I see your hand's up for a question.
Yeah, I think James kind of partially hit on it. Right, in my mind, maybe you all can tell me if I'm thinking about this wrong, but when I think about what we want to set the target amount for the reserve, it's based largely on what do we think the risk is to the entity, and what is our level of risk, and in terms of that we would need access to this level of cash, what level of cash we would need the ability to have some quick access to. And so I guess that, James, maybe to your point on the IT, do we think that the risk threat that we need a reserve of X amount relates to IT challenges coming from the feds, or is it related? I guess I'm trying to figure out what's our risk? So
like all organizations, we are vulnerable to IT security. So if something comes up, and then and we have to a new challenge comes across, that way we have to adjust, make changes to our system. That could be very expensive very quickly. So that's a risk that's out there for everybody, not just for us. So we have to have the cash on hand to make that adjustment. Again, we don't have a line of credit or notes that where we could borrow from. So we are our only available funds unless we turn to the state. So we are our only source of funding for any emergencies is our reserves. And that's probably the biggest reason, best reason that why we need to have the maximum amount available. And we think at least 1 year is probably the most we would need for 9 months. But our IT is probably our biggest risk because we've invested over $100 million only with DSS to create the system we have in place now. And if we had to make big adjustments because of a new risk that came out of nowhere, in the last couple of years, we've had risk coming out of the Ukraine, Russia, that impacted not just us, the entire certain segment of our industry, that we have to take action very quickly to protect our system. And those risks are becoming more. It's with AI on the horizon right now. They move very, very quickly, and our ability to keep up with them, not just us, but industry's ability to keep up with those challenges are becoming less and less likely. So
is the risk like an IT security that we think we're going to get hacked, or is the risk that the IRS or CMS or our various governing bodies will force change on the computer program? I'm not sure.
Both.
So on the hack one, have we looked into the question of like an insurance? Obviously there's insurance products that were out there.
Insurance is becoming more. I'll let Susan talk about that, but it's becoming more and more expensive, and they are limiting their exposure, meaning that they have a high threshold before they start paying money out. We gotta absorb more out of our pocket before they start paying out. But they also require us to do a whole lot more to make our system more secured before they would underwrite. So last year we had to, for the current fiscal year, we had to go out and look more than once or more than twice to secure insurance, and we did. So we do have insurance, but it's becoming more expensive. But the deductible, if you will, is been gone up, and they're also asking us to do a whole lot more before they cover you.
Yeah.
So if we go to this level of security, can we drop the insurance?
Well, I'm not so sure it'd be a good business policy to drop insurance in our case, because our vulnerability, because even if we're always chasing the perpetrators in this space because they are always ahead of everybody else and coming new ways to attack systems, and it's mostly coming from overseas. In many cases, we get alerts. We have systems in place where we get alerts from the federal, from FBI, and other agencies to make us aware of that's out there. Be aware of it. Then we check our system to make sure are we prepared for it. If not, what do we have to do to make that adjustment? But it's always after effect. And we do have checks in place to catch any challenges before they become big issues. But sometimes, again, the perpetrators, they are always coming up with new ways to attack systems, not just about all systems.
And I would just add, Matt, this is Susan Richby, that under our enabling legislation, as we are quasi, we're not part of the state, quote unquote, so we don't have sovereign immunity. We have the ability to sue and be sued. We're also required to, procure insurance, for a risk program. So we have a robust insurance program in the area. James is talking about cyber coverage, which is obviously vitally important in other areas as well. And we also require any of our vendors that have access to system data and consumer data, we require them to have very high cyber liability coverage as well to, as a protection, because you just, as James mentioned, you never know, what can happen. But we do have that. And we were fortunate with the CMS grant that we got in 2021, I believe it was, under ARPA, to use some of those funds for one of Janelle's programs that we wanted to put in a system event monitoring system. So as James mentioned, we now have better technology also monitoring all of our systems, but the cyber coverage is just, a key component of the whole picture.
And Matt, there's just one more. Our system, the core of our system is more than 10 years old. And so the technology we're using to process applicants is more than 10 years old. So we think just that makes us very vulnerable in terms not just security, but also processing. Something breaks down, we have to be able to adjust very quickly. And we are working on a strategy that we're going to go back to the strategy committee to how do we upgrade our system to make it better, faster, more efficient, so residents could apply for health insurance more efficiently, more effectively. But we're using the exact same technology that we were using back in 2013. Behind, in the guts of our system is still the same.
This is Claudio. I don't know if Commissioner Giuttani, I saw that your hand was up, but it's down now. Did you want to do any follow-up? If not, I had one question.
Thank you, Claudio. I had the same question on cybersecurity insurance that Matt asked, so that's why I put my hand down. And I guess I just will follow up with that. I understand the challenges that you're discussing, but it seems to me, at least on first presentation, that 6 months of reserve was probably sufficient, I guess. So I'm trying to just, in my own mind, understand why. And I understand the challenges that you've outlined, James, but, the justification for more.
Well, again, there are so many unknowns out there that we just don't have a good answer for. Again, if the federal government changed their requirement for system security, and we have to invest money to adjust our system. Again, every year we get new requests from the federal government. Sometimes they give you a timeline to implement these changes, and if it's within a fiscal year, and we have to go to our reserve to draw down reserve to pay for the adjustment to our system, so that we can meet the IRS and CMS requirements. That's why we think that that we need at least a 9-month reserve requirement. But there's also our system is so old, the technology is so old. If it breaks down, and we have to hire emphasis or Deloitte type of organization to come in to fix it. We need to have the resources in hand. Again, as indicated, we don't have any other source of revenue for emergency expenditures other than our reserves.
Sorry, just as a follow-up, Manisha Jutani here again. I guess my question is, when the federal government does make such a request, do they give you any opportunity to request any funding to support the enactment of that request that they or new rule that they put in place? Or is that just assumed that, you know, there's no follow-up with that from the federal government opportunities?
No. So far, the only time they made money available to us was during COVID, and that was specifically for COVID purposes, but part of ARPA. But usually when they give us new mandates, security mandates, there's no funding attached to it.
So I would encourage us as we continue to iterate, and this is Claudio again, refine the reserve policy and bring it for a full board discussion eventually. I would point us in a couple directions. One, I think we need to quantify risk as two different dimensions of risk. I think they're the ones that are the one-shot debilitating directly to your business model, like a lawsuit that's unsurmountable or a cyber attack that puts us out of business. Those are different than, to me, an operational risk. Typically, when we think about and why we quantify reserve policy in months, it's to address a volatility. Are you going to lose market share? Is there going to be just huge costs, a COVID, a pandemic, something that's going to just throw off your operating budget? And there, I think we need to really look at the fact that, you know, Access Health and state-based exchange have been around for a while. None of them have gone bankrupt. They have a pretty good track record. Compared to all other businesses, I think we need to look at risk from the context of highly unlikely they go bankrupt. They do have the ability to assess. Year over year, our change in enrollment on the individual side, at least, has been relatively constant. You know, you don't have that cataclysmic drop. You don't have a lot of competitors necessarily in the individual market that can immediately jeopardize the operational revenue. So I do think on operational side, our risk is relatively low compared to other entities in business. And I hear you that there needs to be some quantification of the risk that goes directly to the heart of our ability to run and operate. And on that, I don't know if months is the right quantification. I think it's looking at what our insurance covers and what our outside liability is and the likelihood of that happening. So maybe we need to look at this two-dimensionally when we bring it to the board. The last thing I would say is I think when we come to IT infrastructure, as a board member, I know I'd like us to be proactive. Like if our infrastructure and the guts of our system is 13 plus years old, then let's build into our budget on a yearly basis, making those investments in maintenance and upgrade as we go along. Let's be deliberate about doing that, not just wait for the system to clonk out and then have a crisis. So maybe we need to just be more forward thinking on a strategic investment plan from a capital perspective to stay current and to stay on top of some of the infrastructure and IT build.
Mr. Chairman, that is precisely what we're doing with working with the strategy committee. We do have a capital strategic initiative that I've been discussing with Steve Hernandez that we will be bringing to the strategy committee on at the January meeting, specifically addressing everything you just mentioned about our 13-year-old system. For the first 5 years, we were tweaking the system to make it work more efficiently, more effectively, and then for the last 5 years, we've been using it as we focus on giving people access to health insurance. Now we're at a point now where we are thinking strategically for the next 5 years what type of system we need, and that's where we are at this point. And again, that'll be coming to the board rather sooner than later. Again, you may have heard me mention the 10 clicks or less project. Again, make it easier and more effective, more efficient for people for Connecticut residents to shop, compare, and enroll in health insurance, whether it be Husky or QHP.
All right. Thank you, Claudio, again, and I think that brings us to the last item, which is just a motion for us to adjourn for today. So time is 10:51. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
Yep. I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All right, let's take the vote.
Claudio Gualtieri,
Yes?
Matthew Brackman,
Yes.
Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Chantal Vars,
Yes.
and Manisha Jutani.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thank you all.
weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.